Thing right there. Hey, family, welcome back to Woman's Heart Podcast, your go-to destination for exploring faith, inspirational health, and personal growth. Today, we have a truly inspiring guest. She's incredible, and she's a dynamic leader and driving force behind Women's Coaching PwC, which is a life and executive coaching firm dedicated to serving military-affiliated women. Let's delve into her inspiring journey and her passion for empowering women and building strong communities. Get ready to hear from a powerhouse. Keep watching so you can get your blessing. Hi, and welcome back to Woman's Heart Podcast, a wellness podcast where we explore faith, inspiration, health, and personal growth. Today, we have on the show with us Charleta Harvey. She's joining us from way down there. Where are you from, Charleta?
I'm in Hampton Roads, Virginia, by way of my office in Old Town, Portsmouth.
Wonderful. And Charleta is a dynamic leader and founder of Women's Coaching PwC, a life and executive coaching firm serving military affiliated women. She also brings a wealth of experience with a career spanning corporate advising as a community supporter at H.E.R shelter and entrepreneurial development with Envision Lead and Grow. Beyond her coaching, she's a founding member of the corporate secretary of the H.E.R Fund, which she'll tell us a little bit more about as we get further into the discussion. She is a powerful woman. It's really what I see it from, and I've been experiencing this with you for a couple of years now that I've seen you all
It's
in
been at least 2, if not 3 years at this point.
Yeah. And I just have to say, Powerful Women's Investment Club. That's all I can say. And then you can just share the rest about that. But
Absolutely.
As a military spouse herself, she is deeply committed to the armed forces community, which we can see. And she's joining us, and we're going to explore her journey and her dedication to empowering women and building strong communities. So welcome to the show today, Charleta.
Thank you so much for having me. I am thrilled to be a part of the Woman's Heart community. Excited. Let's get into it.
We are excited. So let's jump right on in. Why don't you tell us who you are from your heart and what makes you get up in the morning?
So first and foremost, I would say that who I am truly is a daughter of the King. I have spent the entirety of my life learning that and really seeking to understand what that means on different levels. And I've certainly, over time and life experience and maturity, had different seasons of that identity, right? Because I didn't, I was a little girl. I was raised Pentecostal. And so we went to church, and great grandmother, God rest her soul, we were in the storefront church, and she had her tambourine and all the things. And she would teach us about what it means to know God, to love God, to serve God. And one of my very first homework assignments as I became a school-age child was to learn the Lord's Prayer. That was like my homework, right? And so I certainly had one view of being a daughter of the King at that age, because I didn't even know what that meant. And then as a teenager, it was like, oh God, I got to go to church and all the things. And then as a young adult, kind of out into the world and having, had my share of experiences. Some were great, some not so great, but certainly in all of that, he kept me. And then as life spanned it on, and I adjusted my beliefs, I adjusted my intentionality around, my pastor would say, having relationship with him for myself, really defined me as I am now, truly a daughter of the King, because I've had some life experiences as an adult that have firmly and fervently demonstrated just how much he loves me. So when you ask me, inspires me to get up in the morning, it is the gift of life. Years ago, this October, survived a brain aneurysm. The circumstances around, it's too much to get into here, but I will just say this. The circumstances around how that happened and how it played out, but for the grace of God, we would not be having this conversation. Literally was a circumstance where it happened. I didn't realize it happened. And so I walked around for 3 days, not 3 hours, 3 days, unaware that I had survived a brain aneurysm. People who have that experience also have a stroke. I did not have a stroke.
Mm-hmm.
The time I went to the emergency room, and that again was after 3 days, and my husband's insistence and this headache,
I was going to ask you, well, how did you know that
yes,
you had a bad headache? Okay.
is I had a bad headache, but
Mm-hmm.
I started dealing with migraines after having my first child. So honestly, an aneurysm never crossed my mind. I really thought it was happening, or rather it happened in a very busy season in my life, and I was drinking a lot of coffee, more coffee than I normally would have.
Okay.
I thought, okay, I had too much caffeine. I'm critically dehydrated at this point, is what I'm thinking. You're diagnosing, right? And I just had this really awful headache. But it never occurred to me that it was an aneurysm. Meanwhile, my husband was saying to me, I think we really need to go to the you checked out, because I laid around for 3 days.
Right.
And it wasn't, he's like, that's not like you to just lay around. I really think we need to go. And so I finally gave in to, to the ER. I get there and go through all the things, and determined that I had in fact survived a brain aneurysm, but I did not have a stroke. And they were, blown about that because of the time that had elapsed. And I ended up needing to have brain surgery, but unfortunately, well, it's not unfortunate, it's unusual.
Yes.
At the time that I had the aneurysm, a high school of my son, his mother had just passed away the month prior of an aneurysm in her sleep. So understanding the severity of that, having had two relatives in my own family who from aneurysms, my thing was I need to go home and see my children.
Right.
And so after I had all of the tests and they determined that it hadn't ruptured, I opted to go home. I wouldn't recommend that, by the way, but
it was you.
public service announcement, I would not recommend
Right.
that. Opted to go home, and I was able to do so because the ER, who's called an interventional radiologist, determined after having the spinal tap that the aneurysm did not rupture. So I would need brain surgery, but it was in what's called open surgery, where they actually have to cut your scalp and cranial area and all of that.
Right.
Other procedure called aneurysm coiling, they do the repair through your groin. And so with that, the different recovery process is a different surgical process. And so I was able to go home, had surgery 30 days to the day after the aneurysm happened. So it happened October 27th, 2018. I had brain surgery November 27th, 2018. I was in the ICU, the neuro ICU day. I went home the day after having brain surgery, and I was in church 5 days later.
Wow.
I have nothing but God, and I have a platinum brain implant.
Wow.
So I am, as I said moments ago, God has demonstrated that he fully, truly, fervently loves me. You follow what medicine says, I should not be sitting here. I mean, I think about years after it happened, my daughter was still in high school, and she was taking this AP anatomy class, and she, they had a report on a different part of the body. And of course, she chose the brain because she had, right? And so in her research, she found that only 3%, I believe it was, of the world population survives a brain aneurysm.
Wow.
Not of the national population here in the United States, of the world population.
So not only are we talking to a miracle, but you're part of the 3%ers.
The 3%ers. And then if you take that and compare it to those survived an aneurysm and did not have and were not therefore left disabled, right? The percentage is even less.
Right.
And so I did not, I mean, like I said, brain surgery legitimately hours or so by interventional radiologists. I had a metal brain implant, but it was one of those things. And like I said, the procedure is called an aneurysm coiling. You can look it up through the Mayo Clinic. It's fascinating.
Right.
And I was in for one day. I went home, and 6 days later, I was in church, to the shock of the entire congregation.
That truly is a miracle. I mean, when you think about it, and some people just keep going. Like you have a story. It's amazing. So thank you for sharing that. So
Yeah,
when you get up in the morning, you getting
that's
up,
why I
you
get
a
up.
whole nother yeah.
Yeah, that's why I am
Right.
very clear because as
Mm,
I said, I have two family members that died of brain
right,
aneurysms.
right.
One that was in I believe his 20s, the other one was in his 60s, and both of them died instantly. I lived, and not only did I live, I
Mm-hmm.
walked around with it unprepared for
Not even
33
knowing.
days. The
Yeah.
3 days
Mhm.
I didn't know, and then the additional 30 days prior to surgery. And so I get up every day because I recognize he let me live because there truly is an assignment on my life. And so
Right.
I made it my business to get down to business once I was able to.
I love that. That is so good. Thank you for sharing that. So why don't you tell us a little bit, shift a little gears a little bit. Tell
Okay.
us a little bit more about your journey. Like you started this amazing coaching where you
Mm-hmm.
really focus on military affiliated women. So
Mm-hmm.
and you're a military spouse yourself, and you've also served as well.
No, I have not. Well, in the traditional sense of wearing the uniform, no, I have
Mhm.
not served. But
Okay.
anyone knows when you're married to someone who
You
serves,
serve.
you are serving. Um,
Exactly.
in many, many ways. But
Mhm.
prior to that, actually, my journey, my story, or a member of the community
Yeah.
comes been born into a family that has served.
Right.
Um, I have my mother actually was the only one of my grandmother's children who did not join the armed forces. So I have a long line. My grandfather, my uncles, my aunties, etc.,
Mhm.
served. And so the idea of supporting that community, I certainly didn't think about, what that would be. No plans on marrying someone in the military, quite
Mhm.
frankly,
Mhm.
because I saw the sacrifice, saw the separation. But
Right.
I also saw the service. But it was, these long gaps if you're away from family, and
Mhm.
there is certainly
Yeah.
the of life and danger and all the
Yes.
things in
Mhm.
defense of our country. And the one experience that left, I guess, the indelible mark on me, I was about 9 years old,
Mhm.
and one of my mother's brothers, he was deployed at the and I'm dating myself now. Um, we were at my great house. It was myself, my mother, my great grandmother. Knocks on the door, and my grandmother opens the door, and he is very formal, and he's in his military uniform, and he asks for my grandmother by her full name. And he asks her, is she the mother of my uncle? And,
Mhm.
gives his
Mhm.
full name.
Right.
She said, yes, I am. And then he presents her with this telegram.
Mhm.
This was back when they were still doing
When they were
telegrams.
going
That's
to
why I
the
said
house, yeah.
yes, that's why I said I'm
Mhm.
myself. And he says, something along the lines, regret to inform you, yada, yada, yada. And long story short, was coming to tell, he was a casualty affairs officer.
Mhm.
And he was coming to my grandmother that my uncle had died in combat.
Mm,
And I
yeah.
remember the house erupting in chaos. I didn't fully
Mm,
understand what was
right.
happening.
Right.
I just heard the words that his name and that he had died. And it was, as you can imagine, horrible.
Yeah.
But then 2 days later, same gentleman came back to my grandmother's house with two other people, hat in hand, extraordinarily apologetic and probably embarrassed, and had to sit down and explain to my grandmother that the military had made a mistake.
Wow.
That through a series of errors,
Mhm.
and I mean, human errors,
Yeah.
the uncle actually had not died. There was another soldier who had the exact same name. It was the freakiest thing. He had the exact same name,
Wow.
the exact same birthday. The only difference was the race.
Wow.
So he was Caucasian, my uncle, African American.
Mhm.
And through that one delineating factor, they had initially notified the wrong family.
Wow. Wow.
And
So that right there alone, I mean, just
yeah, that was, I believe I was 9 years old. That was like 40 years ago.
yeah.
And I just, so that to me about the military in the most significant way in terms of service and
Mhm.
sacrifice.
Yeah.
And so I understood it, got the lesson, and I didn't feel like I needed to relive it. But as life and times would happen, I met my husband, my now husband, when he was a plebe at the United States Academy.
Mhm.
And again, I had no intentions of someone in the military, but
Right.
God's sense of humor, right?
This is what one of the things I in
Yes,
life. Yeah.
yes. And it
Right.
and it's about that environment, right? Like I
Right.
said,
Right.
all of my
Makes sense.
relatives. And so we got married, and interesting because we hadn't even been married a year when September 11th happened.
Mm.
And so I
That was
just
upside
remember,
down. Yeah, this
yes,
world
the
went upside
world was
down. Yeah.
upside down.
Mhm.
And I was pregnant with our first child. And so, all of that makes sense of what doesn't make sense. And I was very young, early 20s, as was my husband. And I did not think at that time that I would be in that year, seeing my husband go off to war.
Right.
Right. I understood
Mhm.
military service, but a new war, didn't think that. Had no,
Mhm.
that wasn't on my big
Right.
scene.
Right.
And so that was an experience all in and of itself. And it was a circumstance where, in the context of us deciding about having, this family, etc., my husband a very traditional rearing,
Mhm.
and had asked me to be at home with our son.
Mhm.
I was at home for about months,
Mhm.
went back to work, worked for a few years, starting that progression on the career ladder,
Yeah.
etc. And then I got pregnant again, and we, revisited that conversation. He asked me at home again. Sure, okay, great. But this time with this child, my daughter had some serious health challenges
Mhm.
as a little. And so I up being home with her for several years, and those first turned into more than a decade. Well, in that
Right.
time, I had some life transitions that I wasn't necessarily expecting because, choosing to be at home with children, it was an easy choice, but it was also a hard decision,
It is
right? Say
hard.
it is a choice, and that I always choose my family. But
Right.
the decision to be at home for more than a decade, I did not come by consciously, fully,
Mhm.
nor easily, right? And in that time, I began to feel myself slip away, who I was as a woman,
Mhm.
certainly as a person with their own professional aspirations, navigating being an African American woman to a naval aviator at
Mhm.
a time when my husband really was a unicorn, right?
I've heard you
He
say before, and I was like, he
yes,
really was a unicorn.
yes, he was a
So
unicorn.
I'm
So he
curious. Yeah.
started out in one aviation flying the S3B Vikings, and that was um pre 9/11, 9/11, and after 9/11, the S3B Viking was decommissioned as a naval aircraft. And upon some of the things that he during his 9/11 deployment, he was
Mhm.
promoted to the F-18 community. And you didn't see a lot of F-18 aviators of color
Right.
at that time. And so every naval command that we would go to, my husband almost always was the only one. And so that in and of itself was a challenge. You talk about microaggressions, and I don't
Yeah,
want to get
I'm
with
sure
that, but
you
it was
both have
real.
experienced that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it
over
was,
the
it
years.
was, what one incident where I showed up to a spouse because my husband's a naval officer, so we would have these spouse club meetings.
Mhm.
It's the
Mhm.
officer wives, etc. And the military really is a small community. So you show up in enough places, you see the same people over and over
Right.
and over again.
Exactly. Mhm.
And I show up to this spouse club meeting because we've just joined this new command.
Mhm.
And I was raised Southern. In a room, you open your mouth and you speak to everyone,
Exactly.
right? And there were several women that I recognized. All of the women did not look like me. I was the
Right.
only one,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But there was this one in particular who had the distinct look on her face of who let the help in the front door. I'll say it like that, right?
Mhm.
As I
Mhm.
walked in the room and spoke to everyone. And so we had, the spouse meetings, there's this, and then at a certain point, you get down to the business of the squadron and how we're supporting the guys and whatever. And so I will never forget the commanding officer's wife. She got the process of introducing all of the new spouses to the
Mhm.
group, and she gets to my husband, and she calls him by, which is customary.
Mhm.
And she said, yeah, this is so and so's wife. So and so is the new department head here, da da da. And
Mhm.
woman me that look of a fence that I dared walk in the front door. I happened to her gaze as she's looking up, and I noticed all of the color draining from her face.
She's like, oh, I did not know what I was doing.
And that
Right.
matters.
Wow.
I figured out through conversation with other people who her husband was. And it was unfortunate. My husband and I had just maybe 2 days prior to that meeting had a conversation where he was speaking to me about her husband and how fond he was of him, his work ethic, etc.
Wow.
So that color draining face, or that facial experience that we were our eyes locked and she's losing color. She realized her husband works for my husband.
Wow.
Oh, it was the best. It was the
Other way around, right?
No, ma'am. No, ma'am. And so that of itself, I think, is
Yes.
a lesson about first impressions,
It
right? Because
is.
you
It
never
really is.
know
Yeah.
who's in the room. And she
Right. You
really
never
looked
know.
offended when I walked in the room, did
Right.
not speak, kind of smirked at me, and and all of the. So then she has this moment of comeuppance, and it's no one else knows it's happening,
Right,
right?
because you all have at this point locked eyes. You know what's going
Correct.
on.
So nobody else knows what is happening. And she looked in my direction very sheepishly. And I, it was to say the least. So
Yeah.
the formality, an hour later, the formality of the meeting ends. We are now having refreshments and all the things. I'm in the kitchen. She comes in the kitchen and she attempts to introduce herself.
Right.
And I said to her, I closed it. There was a little door so you could close the door of the kitchen. And I closed the door behind me and I said, let me stop you there. I know exactly who you are. I know who you're married to. And what I also know is that you will never, ever have to worry about us being friends, because the look you gave me when I walked in the house told me everything I need to know
Good for
about
you.
relationship with you. I will not ever burden you with the pleasure of my friendship.
Wonderful. I love that because we teach people how to treat us. And that one thing
Absolutely.
that you just said,
Absolutely.
you taught her right there. You're gonna
Absolutely.
respect me. You might not
You
like
gon'
me, but you're
but
gonna
you gonna respect me. And
I
she was,
love
but I
that.
just no, no, no. It's okay. It's okay. And will not put you on blast, because
Right.
given
Tell
time,
everybody.
everybody is gonna learn exactly who you are.
Right. It's gonna come out.
And she was beat, embarrassed, and
She should have been.
apologetic. And every single time after that, hi Charleta, how are you? And I would always speak to her and all the things, but yeah, no,
But
no,
she
we're not
knew,
doing
and
that.
you knew. That's the thing.
Absolutely.
You knew.
And that was enough, right?
Yeah.
Enough. And so I had harsh experiences like that. But then I had scary experiences. I had the unfortunate with a spouse. We had an emergency at one of the bases where my husband was stationed, and there was a jet crash right outside the gate. It was a training exercise, and a jet crash, and unfortunately aviators died. And one of the women in our squadron, her husband was supposed to be one of the people flying that training mission. He got pulled off the schedule at the last minute, and someone else put in his place, and that person died. And I can tell you, sitting someone, and remember, I said a few minutes ago, I had the experience as about 9-year-old of a KCO officer coming to my house. So now I'm an adult, and I know what that feels like. In my adulthood, I can go back to childhood and reflect on what that feels like. And so sitting with her, it was probably about 10 hours before she was and that's standard because lots happening right in the background.
Yeah,
It's a process one way or the other. And it was about 10, 11, 12 hours before we found out that her husband was safe. And it was horrible. It was horrible. It was absolutely horrible. And you do it. And those are the things. Sometimes I think people forget that. I mean, certainly 9/11, people respected it more. Certainly in some of the other military operations that have happened since 9/11, people appreciate it differently. But even still, I don't think that universally people appreciate just how much military members and their families really do give and serve. The emotional toll
Yeah, so
is
you speak
significant.
from a personal
Yes. Yes.
relatability perspective.
Yes.
So when
Yes.
coaching women,
Mhm.
you have a lot already to, and then also be able to have that empathy with them because you know exactly where they are.
Yep.
I love
Across dimensions on the spectrum,
it.
from the acceptability politics of being married to an African American aviator in the
Yeah.
F-18 community, from being someone who originated from a family that was all enlisted military. My husband was the first exposure I had to
Yeah.
being a military, being affiliated with the military. It's a very different dynamic in terms of expectation and decorum and all the things. And then being a military spouse and supporting that and trying to carve out and maintain your own identity in the shadow of your partner's service and all that that means when
Yeah.
you have these we call them mandatory fun events where you have to
Yes,
show up. It's
you have to
mandatory
show
fun,
up.
right?
No
Right.
matter what that is
No,
mandatory,
and you're voluntold, right? All the
told to
things.
go. And you
Uh-huh.
gotta
And
show
then
up. Right.
the dynamics around, say that the dude would never impact your spouse's career, but I'm gonna tell you something. I know some women who would disagree
Yeah.
because they had some life circumstances that negatively reflected on their husbands.
Mm-hmm.
And in proper, I would say thing had nothing to do with the other, but if you
Right.
know the backstory,
Mm-hmm.
you would call that statement into question. And so,
Mm-hmm.
across the spectrum of my husband's 23, nearly 23-year career,
Mm-hmm.
we've a lot. And in that, I've had countless, I would say probably thousands of conversations at this point
Mm-hmm.
with different women in the military community, whether they were in uniform, supporting someone in uniform, civilian support someone in uniform, or a dependent of someone in uniform.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that from the inception of my existence in a military family up to my, the entirety of my husband's really was preparing me for the work that I'm doing now.
Because you have to have
Um,
some experience to be able, because
yeah,
it's almost like a life coach. And I was
yeah,
telling someone this week, I was like, you can't, a 19-year-old can't 60-year-old in
absolutely not.
life because you really haven't lived that life yet. It's a
Uh-uh.
life to live. So,
Yeah,
and each
yeah.
person is different, you know.
Yep. Yep. And so, and you bring that up because so at Patriot Woman, do life and executive coaching. And
Mhm.
so people have often asked me, well, what do you think helps you to be an impactful coach? And I said, because I've had some life happen both to
Exactly.
me and
Exactly.
for me,
Mhm.
right? Maturity allows me to see that some of the things in my immaturity that I felt to me
Mhm.
honestly happened for me.
Unfolds. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
but you don't keep living, as the elders say,
Yeah,
right?
that's real.
You
So,
have those experiences, and that informs your
all
ability
of
to
that.
show up differently as a result.
Yes.
So,
All of that. I love that. So, and thank you for your stories. I mean, they're so wonderful.
thank
You
you.
got more stories in there too. So that
There'll
is
be a book
great.
one day. One.
It'll be a 4-hour podcast. We get through it all. That's why you gotta come back on the show because
I
you got
definitely
so much
will.
life experience and in depth that
Yeah.
people so much out there. So
Thank
what do
you.
you find the most rewarding about guiding women through this transformation when you're working with them and helping them and they're kind of making sure that them through their stuff because as a have to be able to listen well, you have to be able to not so much give them advice, but guide them to the right
Mhm.
solutioning that they need. So, what do you find is the most rewarding?
The most rewarding get to witness a woman, a client, a human being having their own breakthrough, whatever that means for them,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because we all have, to your point, we all have a story.
Yeah.
We all have challenges. We all have obstacles. We all have life lessons. Sometimes we have to go around the barn a few times before we get it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when you get to that point of reckoning where you have to do something differently than
Mm-hmm.
you've done in the past. And in doing different, and I'm intentionally saying different versus better, right?
Yeah.
Because I feel like
Yeah.
sometimes, particularly in the coaching arena, it can be harmful to use the word better, because depending upon where the client is, that can land more like judgment,
Right. And you
right?
don't want to be judgmental when you're
Exactly.
working with the
Whereas
client. Right.
using terminology like different, that signifies a
Mm-hmm.
shift
Mm-hmm.
perspective, a mindset, a shift in behavioral habit
Mm-hmm.
pattern. So
Mm-hmm.
for me, the most rewarding thing is witnessing a woman realize she gets to choose,
Mm-hmm.
that she is worthy of choices that will amplify the gift that is waiting for on the other side of what she perceives as struggle,
Mm-hmm.
and then walking out the get there.
Right. And you get to help
That for
usher her
me,
into over to the other side, which I love.
yes, yes, yes. It never gets old. I'm the power of your a part of that, I believe. And I
Yeah.
know for me, in my time as a stay-at-home mom, again, it was over a decade. And I said earlier, and I started to feel like I was losing myself,
Right. And it
right?
can happen.
And
Yeah.
I
Mm-hmm.
I recognized that I had lost the ability to identify the sound of my own voice,
Mm-hmm.
because I was so immersed in my children's mother
Right.
and being my husband's wife,
Mm-hmm.
that it started to feel really was no room for Charleta in that picture. Whatever the picture was that was presented to the world,
Right.
I don't feel like I was really in that picture for a while. It was just my husband, my son, my daughter, right? And that was it. And there was no room for me. And it started to really feel suffocating,
Mm-hmm.
and it was scary because like parts of me were slowly dying. And I can honestly say transparency, it
Mm-hmm.
started to erode the foundation of my marriage. It started to really own mindset.
Right.
It's to harden my heart, all the
Right.
things.
Everything that comes along.
So before I could jump out here and certainly get the professional training and all of that to
Mm-hmm.
be a coach, I had to do my own work.
Yep.
I had to
You
go to
got to do the
therapy.
work. Yeah.
I had to go to therapy. I
Yes.
had to get my own coach. I had to,
Yes.
journal till I couldn't see straight, right? All of the things to
Right.
get it out and through it, and not just work through it, but grow through it. So many times, we talk about I'm going through that. Well, I'd rather grow through this and learn from that.
Right. I
And
love that.
helping other women do that, it
Mm-hmm.
never gets old. Never
I
gets
love
old.
that. That's so great. I love that you have not only found your purpose, but you're walking in your power and you're able to help other women see to walk into their own power.
Mm-hmm.
And so thank you for the work that you're doing. We need
It
you.
really is my
We need you.
pleasure. It
We
really
need
is.
you.
Let me tell you, like I said, God let me survive that aneurysm. I understand the assignment. I couldn't run
Like the
away from
assignment
it.
is real. You just
The
gonna walk it
assignment is
out.
real, and I run
I
away
love
from
it.
it. I ran away from it for a
Mhm,
long
mhm.
time. Survived that. Yeah, I'm clear.
You're
I
like,
was
I'm
very
good.
clear.
I'm back a path.
On the path. I
Yeah.
got it.
Yeah, I
I
love
got
that. So we're going to
it.
choose a little bit because we in your introduction, I highlighted a little about your involvement with the RR Fund, and it's a
Mhm.
women's investment club. So what inspired you to become a founding member for this investment club?
Honestly, part of my decision, a huge part of my decision,
Mhm.
to become a founding member of our fund stems from what I was just speaking about, being in this place of feeling like I had lost myself,
Right.
had lost my purpose, had lost the ability to focus on things that were important to me. And really, because I had been out of the workforce for my days were comprised of either I'm going to a mandatory fund military event or a soccer match or a
Right.
PTA meeting or all the things, but there was nothing really for me. I
Right.
very much felt left behind.
Right.
I very much felt left behind.
Mhm.
And jumping out there in this very significant way, because it's there's a
Criteria,
financial,
there's requirements.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, there's a
Yeah.
5-figure
Mhm. Yeah.
investment.
Right.
Jumping out into the world in this way was honestly a component of me reclaiming my own position, my own place in my little part of the world, and being able to be a part of something that was bigger than myself and learn along the way, and through those learnings pass them to my children, share them with my husband, and begin to create a legacy just rooted in things, but rooted in knowledge,
Mhm.
that once you have knowledge, no take that away from you,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
And so being able to be part of a collective whose focus was building legacy through knowledge building and wealth management,
Mhm.
Yeah, it was a no-brainer. That
Mhm.
Dr. Angela Reddix was one who was the visionary for that, who was
Mhm.
spearheading that, given the incredibly phenomenal things she has done.
Mhm.
Yeah, it was a no-brainer for me.
Awesome. I love that. All of that is
Yeah.
wonderful. And it was meant to be.
Yeah,
Meant to be.
absolutely.
I love that.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
beyond your professional achievements, personal goals and aspirations drive you. And how do you maintain balance, well-being while juggling all of these wonderful opportunities that you're in right now?
Ooh, some days I tell you I'm tired. I'm tired, but I'm gonna keep. I understand the
You keep it
assignment, so I'm gonna
moving,
keep
right?
walking. I'm gonna keep walking. I'm gonna keep walking.
Yes,
Sometimes,
yes.
sometimes I feel like I'm still moving, and that's the important thing. Um, so what drives me? I would say that so there's two things.
Mhm.
Thing one is that much as a woman, but as a human being, I firmly believe that I owe a debt of gratitude to humanity. And in that way, and that's irrespective of color, gender, socioeconomic status,
Mhm.
I have a responsibility, primarily as a daughter of the king, but also as a person walking the earth, to do whatever I can to leave my part of the world better than I found it.
That.
I may not do things on the level where, my name is known worldwide. I can do something where I have an impact in my community, in the extended community, and community begins in the household, modeling certain things for my children.
Mhm.
The responsibility to pay it forward, I learned, from my mother and
Mhm.
my father. That is something that inspires me, the full landscape of who I am as a human being, not just as a woman, a wife, a mom, or a business person, but as a human being. I really believe that I owe a debt to humanity, and it is incumbent upon me to do my part wherever my feet go, whatever my feet touch. So I had a conversation with someone recently, and I was sharing this experience where someone spoke my name positively in a room I wasn't in. And she said, how incredible it is to be blessed in a room where your feet haven't yet touched.
Wow.
And I think that's the
Yes.
gift of recognizing the debt as a human being, right?
Mhm.
The
Mhm.
other part of that is that my life's belief, my life's mantra is that it takes us all to lift us all. It's not
Mm.
about
Yeah.
handouts, right? It's
Right.
about recognizing that when God created us, He did not create us to walk the earth alone. He
Mm.
created us irrespective of race and gender and socioeconomic status and sexual orientation, all those things. I know that society cares about all of those things,
Mhm.
but when he created us, it was just him making us as his sons and daughters.
Mhm.
And in that way, he intended for us to do and be together,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So whatever you do, the Bible talks about the gifts we're all given. All of us are given at least one gift. So whatever your gift is, that taking us all to lift us all, I
Mhm.
got to take my gift to your gift, right? To lift somebody out of whatever so that they can then take their gift and do the same,
Exactly.
right?
Mhm.
Hopefully, someone somewhere will hear even the smallest piece of our conversation today and go, yep, life gets hard.
Mhm.
Scary things happen, but
Right.
I moving forward. I can keep growing forward, right? I might have been out of the game for 10 years,
Mhm.
but I can jump back in right where I am and build from that. That feeling of being left a scary, almost dare
Yeah.
I say, traumatic thing,
And it's a
particularly for
real, and
women.
it's a real because
Yeah.
even with my daughter-in-law, who is a military spouse, we've had conversations where she supported my son through the Coast Guard, and that's a real feeling. She's like,
Yeah.
every time I job or
Mm-hmm.
I get to go do this thing, we move.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, and
Yeah.
then she was home for many, like what you just said, and when she
Mm-hmm.
began to, and I hope Amber hears this at the point where
She's a sweetheart.
yeah, you guys got to meet, which was good. But one
Yeah.
of the things she talked to me about was, she was a little nervous back into the workforce because she hadn't
Mm-hmm.
been in the workforce for so long.
And imposter syndrome is a bear.
Right. It
It's a
started to show
bear.
up for her. And we
Mm-hmm.
were talking through that, and
Mm-hmm.
it's a real thing.
It's a bear. Men don't talk about it as much.
Yeah.
They suffer with it too.
Yeah,
It shows up
definitely.
differently,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
for women, particularly women, I have found in my experience
Hmm.
who are moms, it can be especially crippling
Yeah.
because in addition to the existence of the imposter syndrome in and of itself,
Mhm.
there is this parallel guilt that
You going
as I'm
back and reading,
fighting
yeah.
to establish, excuse me, or reinvigorate my professional
Right.
identity,
Exactly.
that syndrome can cause you to falsely believe that in some way you must navigate, or excuse me, neglect your duties as a mom while you're trying to figure out who you are as a professional. And
Right.
I can say when I reemerge and in such a way, having, launching this business and all the things,
Mhm. Mhm.
one of the most extraordinary gifts that my children gave me was just sharing how seeing me do so created an enormous sense of pride for them.
Isn't that a blessing? They get to see
It
mom like
absolutely is.
outperform,
It
help other
is.
community impact leader lead. That's a blessing.
Yeah, and it is to even when you're successful, dare I say, the bigger your success, the bigger the opportunities. You still have instances where imposter syndrome can show up and you go,
Oh, it
oh, how did
creeps
I get in
in.
this room? How did I
Yeah,
get
it's
this
like
opportunity?
every
Yeah.
level, Charleta, that next level, there's
Yep.
can you really do this? Or even if you're in the middle of doing it, am I doing this?
And am
No.
I doing it correctly? Will they
Right.
like me? Will this is
And should I be
acceptable?
doing something different or someone
All
doing
the
it
things,
differently? Yeah.
all the
Oh.
things.
Mhm.
And my children's, I mean, and I hate to, this doesn't sound negative, but my husband's pride, I love it, I appreciate it, but my children, for
Mhm.
me, it's my
Yeah,
children.
they get to
The
see.
pride that my children speak about is the medicine, it's the antidote for those moments when I have imposter syndrome
Mhm.
trying to creep in. It really is the antidote for that because as a woman, I'm modeling certain things for my daughter, who's a 19-year-old college student.
Mhm.
As a woman, I'm modeling different, but things for my son,
Mhm.
and a little farther along the spectrum of young adulthood, and
Mhm.
you know, figuring out what he desires in a partner and those kind of things. And I'm not saying she has to be like me. However, I know that me being home with them for the 10, 12, 13-ish years I was at home planted some seeds that they will never ever forget and that will inform they continue to show up in the world. And so that, like I said, for me, it is the antidote to those moments when imposter syndrome tries to creep in, and then in the struggle to remedy that, sometimes to not this place of diminished self-compassion when you're questioning, do I belong here?
Right. That's the other.
Does my voice matter?
Yeah.
So does. And
Well,
so
I
yeah,
can tell you that your
that's
voice matters and you what you're doing.
yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So
I mean, the stories alone, and I say I know you got a whole bunch more gold nuggets
yeah,
to share and the wisdom you
yeah,
and it's just amazing. So I
yeah.
would love
Thank
for you
you.
to share your information with the audience, Charleta, so that they can further the conversation if they need to, or someone may reach out to you. They might need your services.
Okay.
It's a magnitude of things that happen.
Yes, yes. And so Patriot Coaching, www.patriotwomancoaching.com. On Instagram, I am Charlie Harvey, MCHARLEEHARVEY. And then LinkedIn, Charleta Harvey, CHARLETA HARVEY. And those are the primary ways to reach me. Also, I would send an email to info@patriotwomancoaching.com. And that is another way to reach me and
Awesome. We'll
have a
also
great
put that
conversation.
information in the show notes, Charleta.
Okay,
Yeah, so
awesome. Thank you
folks
so
can
much.
grab it.
Thank you
Absolutely.
for the time today. This has been fantastic.
It has been amazing. It has been a pleasure having you on the show, and we want to thank you for taking your time out of your busy schedule because I know you're busy, and your heart, your knowledge, your wisdom, and your passion for humanity, and we appreciate
Yeah,
you much, and your expertise. Let's not forget
thank
that,
you.
sharing that.
Thank
So,
you. And it was a pleasure to be here. I'm happy to come back and contribute to the conversation whenever you'll have me to come back. However, I
absolutely.
can, I think particularly state of nationwide, voices matter.
Mhm.
The person that screams, yells the loudest is not the one that's necessarily the wisest, smartest, or most impactful.
Mhm.
What we're learning is they're the scariest,
Yeah,
and it's
we're
it's
learning. That's
incumbent
true.
upon to give in to fear to recognize that tomorrow is challenging, is a new day, and it is absolutely an opportunity for us to come together collectively and recognize that we all can lift us all truly if we leave space for the different voices and the opposing opinions and respect them without just tolerating, right?
Exactly.
Tolerance is one thing, but acceptance, a powerful thing that moves the needle forward. So yeah,
I love that.
happy to
You
come
just
back.
said it all. So you truly are an impact leader. I know you know that. If you don't, I'm telling you again, you are impact
Thank
leader.
you so
It's
much.
so important to hear what you have to say, and we definitely will have you on the show again. So thank you.
Thank you. It was my be here. Have a
Absolutely.
beautiful, beautiful rest of your day.
Thank you, you as well. And as we wrap up this show, and if you've enjoyed it, remember to like, share, subscribe to the podcast. You can connect with me at vtoday@gmail.com, and you can learn more about our services and resources at Voices of Encouragement and what we offer. You can go to voicesoфencouragement.com. And remember, as I always say at the end of every show, Ephesians 4:1, walk worthy of the call for which you were called.
Amen.
Amen.